Once upon a time, in the colorful village of Willowbrook, where the trees were as lively and animated as the folks who lived there, two best friends named Connie and Paul embarked on a fascinating journey to understand what it truly meant to be kind. Willowbrook was not your typical village, it bustled with personality and character, much like our two young heroes. Connie was a spirited girl with a heart so big, it seemed to glow like a tiny sun. She wore her kindness as naturally as she wore her bouncy curly hair. Paul, her inseparable companion, was thoughtful and curious, always ready to question everything around him and observe the world with his wide, mischievous eyes. One sunny afternoon, as the daffodils swayed happily with the breeze, Connie and Paul decided to help Mrs. Thornberry, the village's elderly grandmother, with her garden. Mrs. Thornberry was known for her enchanting stories about the swashbuckling days of yore, and her stories had deep magical undertones that captivated anyone who listened. As Connie and Paul arrived at Mrs. Thornberry's cottage, they found her struggling to lift a basket of flowers. "Oh, dearies," she exclaimed, wiping her brow. "I seem to have taken on more than my knees can handle today." Connie and Paul sprang into action, their age not betraying their impressive ability to carry heavy loads. They worked hard, pruning leaves and carrying flowers, helping Mrs. Thornberry with every task she set before them. As the stories and compliments poured, Connie's heart soared with a sense of purpose. She loved the feeling of making others happy. Paul, on the other hand, began to feel a little uneasy. Despite the cheerful atmosphere, he noticed how Connie was getting more and more exhausted by the day, and her once bright eyes were now clouded with fatigue. "Connie, maybe we should rest a bit or at least not do everything all at once," Paul suggested cautiously one evening. "Oh, Paul, it doesn't matter if we're a bit tired. Helping Mrs. Thornberry is nice," she insisted. But that night, as Connie lay in bed, her weariness caught up with her. She dreamed she was trying to paint the sky, climbing ladders only to find that the sky stretched endlessly, never getting fully colored. The next day, Connie and Paul were called over by Mr. Jenkins, the baker, to help with some bread delivery. Exhausted yet committed to being nice, Connie agreed eagerly. Paul, however, gently reminded her of her fatigue and the dream she had shared with him. "Connie," he said in a soft voice, "it's great being nice to people, but we must take care of ourselves too. What if being truly kind means knowing our limits and setting boundaries?" Connie was thoughtful for a moment, nodding slowly. "Maybe you're right, Paul. But how do you know when to say no without being unkind?" The two friends decided to seek advice from the wise old owl, Solomon, a friendly yet feisty character who lived at the edge of the woodland. Solomon listened to the children's worries while perching on a regal oak tree, his feathers shimmering with mystical wisdom. "Ah, my dear hatchlings," Solomon hooted. "Kindness is like a garden. If you give away all your flowers, you won't have any left for yourself. Similarly, one cannot help others without first tending to their own roots."